presentation document. That's Brent McIntosh. We have heard a lot of presentations dealing with global issues, global IPv6 related issues, and we would like to hear more about what is going on in the Caribbean. And in this particular case, Brent is going to focus on what is going on in the Caribbean with respect to IPv6. So, Brent, please come and share with us.
Everybody got happy when you said last presentation. One thing Mark didn't tell you is that the United States actually had, I think, 31.5% of the entire IPv4 space. Mark, is that true? You gave out too much, right?
Yeah, so actually a large part of that is legacy. Yeah. So a significant number of that is legacy. So if you take that away, it's actually less than a couple of the other regional registries, both AP and Nick and Wright, based on their sort of longevity, being there before Aaron. Yeah. They actually have given out more at that point.
Thanks. So
why would people want to give that back? If you have a /8, why would you want to keep it?
I opened up a can of worms, right?
You did.
That's fine.
So I guess there are various institutions. Does this work? Should I turn on? Do I need it?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So there are various institutions over the past that have given back space. A good example is Stanford. Another one is most recently is Interop. There are other institutions that, frankly, are putting this on the market, trying to get money, right? So for example, is it Lucent? Is that the name of the ISP, the vendor that went bankrupt? Nortel, thank you. So Nortel is the example of one who was trying to get as much money as they can out of bankruptcy proceedings. So what they did is they were able to find someone who was willing to purchase some of that space. So, and it started a whole ecosystem. The ecosystem existed before that. It was all kind of underground, but now it's actually come up. And so the motivations for some of these other legacy holders, what they're going to do with their space, that's, who knows. Some of them, I've heard rumors that some are actively on the market trying to sell their space. Much of it seems the interest is coming from the Asia Pacific side.
But they have to sell it to you guys.
No. So the policy that we're under right now is on the receiving side. The receiving side is that they need to qualify for that space.
So how do they qualify if there's no authority to actually stuff running for you guys?
In this case, it's an extra step. So someone's willing to sell it, someone's willing to buy it. When that party that's willing to buy it also has to come to us and say, here is what we're planning on doing in that space. And when they do, we based on their criteria, the policy that we follow, we say, okay, you can, because you qualified for that space, go ahead and pay your money to that third party and you will get it. And we'll make sure that you're the registered holder of that space.
Okay, so it does go through you guys at the end of the day?
At the end of the day, it goes through Aaron and probably LACNIC too on doing these things. I don't know that much about the policy for LACNIC. So does that answer?
No, because I was wondering, because you could be the one that stops the business at the end of the day. If you decide not to have them resell it to you guys, because it has to come to you anyway.
Okay, so let's be clear about one thing. Let's be clear that money that's exchanged, is not coming through us, right? It's not coming through us at all. That money is directly between the buyer and the seller. We just make sure that the buyer, the purchaser, the needer, is the one justifies the need for that space. And if they do buy the policies, that's within the area region, they'll get it. And now there's quite a bit of negotiation that occurs as people go through saying, hey, I'm interested in buying a space. The we're really savvy needers, purchasers, whatever you want to call them, they're the ones that come and say, hey, look, we're thinking about buying this space. Will we qualify? And before they go ahead and write the check and then find out they don't qualify, then they're in trouble. And I don't know if anyone was actually in that case where they didn't qualify that paid the money.
Right. Thanks, Mark. So I'm going to keep it not too long today. I'm going to just talk a little bit about the positive experiences and some of the challenges in the Caribbean. For the most part, it has been good so far. So, simple agenda. I basically spoke about who we are yesterday. I'm not going to bore you with that today. I spoke about our services, but we're going to move on to IPv6 and why we should care and why Columbus actually decided to take on that path. And we're going to speak a little bit about some of the IPv6 related achievements in the Caribbean and the future for Columbus. And even though it's the future for Columbus, we hope it's the future for the other providers as well, because I think this is one of the areas that we really need to collaborate and work together, share experiences, right? So I spoke about that yesterday. Hopefully everybody who was here yesterday is here today. We're a triple play service provider. We provide transit services. These are the areas in which we operate in. We do some cloud solutions as well. And just some links to our website. Services, cable TV, internet optical access, Metro E, IPv6 support over direct internet access circuits, IPv6 support over fiber. That is primarily in Curaçao, Grenada, and Trinidad so far. Residential internet access, and let me just go back a little bit. Some IPv6 support. Like I said yesterday, we actually, for World IPv6 Day, we were already pairing with Columbus Networks and Hurricane Electric. So what we did is just turned on a 6-to-4 tunneling just for that day. But internet, right? It's working, and we never really bothered to turn it off. So if you have a cable modem home, right, and because after listening to Chris and Mark, we turn this off, probably next week. But if you want to test it tonight, you can just plug your, if you're running Windows Vista, Mac OS, XP, Windows 7, you can just plug directly in, and you should get an automatic tunnel being formed. With XP, you have to type IPv6 install. You need to install it. Cable TV, broadband access, which is IPv6 ready, but not quite, but it's about 90% there. Direct internet access, again, supporting IPv6, telephony, cloud-based services. I'm just going to move on quickly and get to the meat of this. So these are our points of presence in the Caribbean and the Americas. Of course, we're in Miami, in the USA, Jamaica, Curaçao, Grenada, Barbados, Trinidad, and possibly St. Lucia in the next week or so. Why bother? So, after having, tons of discussions and meetings, with different stakeholders and our CTO, nobody saw it important as, IPv4 is there for a while, we shouldn't really bother with IPv6. But I think from reports from most of the meetings we attended, our CTO decided that it is something very critical. And if you look at the depletion of the IPv4 address space, you'll see why it's important to move. For Columbus, there's two main reasons. It's business continuity and also addressing the IPv4 depletion issue. So Chris told you that there's actually 4.3 billion addresses in IPv4 space, right? But you know that it's only 76% that is actually usable, because the rest goes to stuff like experimental, loopback, private addresses, multicast, right? So you can't even use that full address space, so it makes sense actually making that transition. Just to give you a quick look at the IPv6 allocation, this is what it looks like for regional internet registry. So, folks in Curaçao should have from this space. And it's only a very small, I tend to call it a small allocation from the entire V6 space. It's /3. That's the equivalent of 506/12s, lots of addresses. This gives you an idea of the prefix allocation, the global routing prefix allocation for our business. Columbus, USA has 2/32s. Jamaica has one, Trinidad, Grenada, Curaçao, and e-commerce park. So after doing a couple of things, which was an audit of our equipment, just to ensure which ones support IPv6, which one will need upgrading, we went on to acquire our blocks. And that happened in a very short space of time. I think I was asking LACNIC some time ago, at one point it would start charging for this, right? Because IPv6 allocations are at no cost at this stage. But I know the charging might start soon, right? Or was it a trick for us to start?
That's been postponed for next year.
Next year? Okay, good. Well, you have one more year, so it makes sense, right? So after getting that address space, what's next, right?
May I comment about that?
Yes, please. That's very important to us as well.
Yeah, I know that the fixed structure is a big concern for some of you. But the thing is, if you already have IPv4 space, in the way the fees are calculated, you will be ending paying the same thing. It won't affect you. At some point, we expect to have more, customers with more IPv6 than IPv4, but it's not going to happen anytime soon, I guess. So if you're already a member of LACNIC, you shouldn't be concerned about the fee, because actually the way it's calculated is your category will be determined by the largest allocation that you have, either the IPv6 one or the IPv4 one. And usually, the IPv4 one will be much larger than IPv6 in terms of how it's measured. Not obviously counting addresses, but in terms of blocks on nets. So for most, if not everybody, the fee will be determined by the IPv4 space and not the IPv6 one. At some point, as people move to IPv6 will be more heavy, to say that, and the fee will be probably determined by the IPv6 allocation, but I guess it's not going to happen for the next 5 years or so. Of course, if you only have IPv6, then it's a different story, but it's not the case.
Thanks, Carlos. So we did a little research into IPv6 allocation in the Netherlands region, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here. We found 12 global routing prefixes allocated to, I said Curaçao, but in the Netherlands region, Netherlands Antilles. Of course, the IXP Carix has a /47 for their use. And we found that there were 10 ISPs, which we thought was a very good initiative, right? And I'm going to show you something after which was surprising, but very good as well. And there's one enterprise. I think that enterprise, they assigned a /40, which is like the minimum assigned by the regional internet registry. And I think that enterprise is in the room. And within the next month, I think they're going to be Flow's first IPv6 transfer customer. So things are actually happening in Curaçao. And of those 10 ISPs, 2 advertise their prefixes globally. So that's a very good sign for Curaçao and the Netherlands and Antilles region. So this is just some quick statistics. There are 13, probably 12 allocations for Netherlands and Antilles. Trinidad has 4. Of those 4, 3 advertised. Grenada has 1, Jamaica 4, Cayman 2, Guyana 1. So not everybody who has allocations route them globally, but it's a start, right? So this just gives a good picture of what's happening in the Caribbean. This is just an illustration of our model. All the BUs will be pairing, most of them already paired directly to Columbus networks for transit IPv6 capacity. The same thing, more or less just showing you the allocations. So it's easy to spot the ARIN and the LACNIC address blocks. This is just just an illustration of what's happening in terms of IPv6 support in in this case Grenada. It was kind of easy to pull the stats for Grenada actually. So this is the test site, IPv6test.com, and that shows 8 tests being done, but there is to date I think 5 or 6 customers that have native IPv6 services, whether it's a website or email service in Grenada. Testing, but working models, right? So this just shows that there is a dual stack use. And this was more or less done around World IPv6 launch and World IPv6 Day. Between that period, we've tested stateless DHCPv6 web services, websites built using IS7 and Apache, content caching with Akamai and Google, both v4 and v6. And actually, in those deployments, we actually had to use stuff like VRP version 3. So it was quite a bit involved, but it was a very good learning experience there. I have documents I can always share with you as well. Tested email, POP3 and IMAP. Tested basically all the routing protocols Carlos spoke today. In the case of ISIS, it was more in a closed environment because we don't use it really in the Caribbean. I'm not sure if that's the case in Curaçao. Anybody uses ISIS here? And some of the operating systems we tested, Apple OS, Windows, and Linux. So just to give you an idea of some things to local websites. The first one is caribnext.net. Look at the response time. So that's on our net test. Ping to Yahoo. And this is from Grenada to Yahoo as well. And this is a little snapshot of the BGP routing table from the perspective of one of the local routers. And pretty much that's what it looks like, similar to IPv4, right? Your destination, your preference, metric, next up. And this is a native pairing. This is the Columbus network. So you see the first ASN. Of course, the exit interface of one is actually a link local address, as Carlos was speaking about this morning. And this is actually I call it a route table. A lot of folks are familiar with the netshell functionality in Windows. That's when the Windows client becomes like a router, right? I'm just looking at a route table, and it just shows it gives you a default your default route. Yeah. And basically that's what it looks like, right? Similar to IPv4. This slide illustrates just some testing done from a dual stack machine. So a native IPv6 address from the Grenada prefix and save for the v4. Just did a quick comparison of what latency looks like. Notice, what do you notice there? Carlos was speaking about it this morning, right? See, this one shows hop limit. The other one shows time to live, right? Basically the same thing. My personal experience is that I can't tell the difference between IPv4 and v6 when I access a dual stack website, right? It's pretty much seamless. It wouldn't work in all cases, especially with 6-4, but with native, it works pretty well. This I got from I think I got this from Carlos, some add-ons in Firefox. This one is World IP and IPv6. So if you hit a native website or a dual stack website, it will actually tell you, of course, when the 6 is green, that means that, and there's a 4. That means you're on a dual stack website. If it's a native IPv6 website, it just shows you 6, and basically tells you that you're connected by IPv6. Just some tools to play with. This shows the IPv6 route propagation for Columbus Curaçao. They pair directly with Columbus networks, and these are the pairs that Columbus networks are paired with. Actually, Columbus have 3 upstream pairs and 9 downstream pairs. So they're already doing transit for many customers around the region, both Central, South America, and the Caribbean. And achievements for 2010-2012, of course, IPv6 transit, which we were able to successfully do. IPv6 internet access availability from the access network, and that's going to be 100% completed by 2013. Content first IPv6 forum certified, the first Caribbean certified IPv6 ISP by the Worldwide Consortium, IPv6 Forum. I'll actually put a link to it if you guys are interested. We got 2 IPv6 Forum certified engineers, 1 gold, 1 silver. Basically, it's easy. Well, you qualify by being, I think, CCNP and CCNA is a prerequisite, and they then test your experience. So you have to prove what you can do IPv6-wise. Of course, IPv6 email service and local websites by local users. And that we intend to expand over the next coming year. Again, there's another, little test that Hurricane Electric does. There are 7 levels. I think it's a pretty good test because you have to know routing, you have to do some work with DNS, some work with email and web services. And they test you as fast as you perform the task they ask, they check over IPv6, and eventually you can certify as a stage. If you look at the distribution in the Caribbean, Grenada has 5 stages, Trinidad has 6. And I noticed there's one from that's probably Curaçao. Is that person in the room? Okay, so maybe Bonaire or Aruba. Okay, all right, but I think I put a link in, so if you're interested in doing that certification, you can do it. It's very helpful. Next steps for Columbus, more stakeholder discussions and requirements. Network review and design is something that you continually have to do. And we took the stance that we're not going to do carrier grade NAT or large scale NAT, but after listening to Mark, it's maybe something we have to consider. But we'll stay as far away from that as possible. Vendor reviews, you have to look at the current vendors for the equipment in your network, as well as putting them to the test, right? There was one vendor that we were looking at some switches from, just for access networks, and they said, yeah, we do IPv6. So we said, okay, send us one, let's test it. It should be a layer 3 switch that does IPv6. When we started testing, we realized it only does IPv6 for management. So we had to tell them thanks, but no thanks. So there's one thing you have to plan for. Again, planning and testing, critical. Your implementation should be phased, both for your enterprise and core networks. We're adopting the model whereby we build from the core out to the edge, right? We're not going to start from the outside and come in. We build the core, then out to the edge. And hopefully by 2015, preferably before, but it needs to be realistic, is complete full migration. So one of the things we're looking at doing is taking the headache away from the customer by providing the IPv6 enabled CP. So we wouldn't send you to the store to buy that $50 residential gateway. We'll actually provide those as well. And that will be doing native IPv6, DHCPv6 in most cases, with something called dynamic prefix delegation, whereby we can also send you a routable /48 or /64. Predicted challenges in the Caribbean. This should be my last slide, so you can get happy now. We see IPv6 security is a huge challenge. I think there's already one known threat, and that's since 2010. I'm not sure if there are more since, but as the protocol becomes more popular, we expect to see more threats, right? Firewall support, that has been painful. We have found some fairly good vendors. I wouldn't call names, but there are firewall out there that supports IPv6. But Mark was saying they need to be put to the test, right? IPv6 address management. It's not that easy, even if you're a small business, right? I think when we just started reviewing how we're going to subnet for a core network, I took an Excel sheet and I said, fine, we have a /32. That's only 65,586 /48s. And each /48 is 65,536 /64s. So I was able to put 65,000 /64s and 65,000 /48s in an Excel sheet, right? Just for one, that was just for one allocation. And I was looking for a particular, Facebook uses a particular address with, the F, A, and that stuff. I was trying to get one that would do something with flow, and I was scrolling down, and I felt that it was going to take me a week to get to the last address. So we need a solution that is based is geared more for IPv6 address management, which we call IPAM. We're looking at vendors as well. There's some very good vendors out there that do that, but they're also good at it. It's kind of difficult to make a choice at this stage, but it's something that is going to be important. I spoke a little about residential gateway support. We are going to put CPs in our network that will do native v4 and v6, but it is a challenge, and it will be a challenge for a lot of providers. New router operating systems to learn. You know, if you're going to do carrier grade NAT and your network has Cisco devices, you need to buy one that supports carrier grade NAT, which is, I think, they're ASRs, they're CRS routers, and I can tell you their cost and airplane or ship are very expensive. Engineers will find that they may have to learn new operating systems, like everybody's familiar with iOS. You know, you may have to learn iOS XR, right? So lucky people who use Juniper, right? Knowledge and the local forums and training, we hope to assist with that. We see knowledge on IPv6 as a challenge because a lot of very good training and very good trainers are located sort of far from us. Most of them are in the US or in Europe. I had the opportunity to meet quite a few, but it's very hard to access them and their time. We hope that we can work with the ISOC and Aaron and LACNIC to see how we can bring those trainers closer to us. And that will help a lot. So transitioning by participation, yeah, this is the last slide. Regional developments, IPv6 implementation at the Grenada Internet Exchange is something we hope to accomplish over the next 6 months. We're just waiting for them to get their own AS and address blocks. Connection of the first local IPv6 customer in Curaçao, we hope to have that done in Q4. It should be pretty soon. Hosting of an LRoot server and a route server at the IXPs, well, primarily in Grenada. And Carabnog 4 to be held in Grenada, and there will be IPv6 access. So Mark, I think you're coming over, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So you will have that access. And then continued participation in the LACNIC and ARN events. I think that is so key, because I think that's one of the reasons why Columbus got started, just from being part of those meetings. And there's some good links you can look at. And that should be the end. And any questions? Right. If not, I just have one question. Posed either to Chris, Carlos, or Mark. I've been reading on some of the LACNOG posts that some engineers are getting the feeling that we're already starting to waste IPv6 addresses. Personally, I have about, and that's in the early days from Hurricane Electric, I have 4/48s and 4 routable /64s. And from my company, I have a /48. And I know, especially in the case of other folks who are testing with tunnel services with Hurricane Electric and so on, pretty much you can get it any amount of allocations. Do you see that as being an issue, or do you think there's no wastage based on the size of the global routing allocation? Sure.
So actually, this is kind of interesting sort of observation. There's this guy named Ron Boersma that is part of the R&D network within the United States, and he's actually has dealt with a lot of consultants that help the U.S. government with their v6 routing plans. And whenever he sees the word conservation in one of the routing plans, he says, throw them out. And that's really sort of the motto is we have like a bazillion, how many? V6 addresses?
340 on the zillion.
Yeah. So we have so many that, now it's true, if you look at over the past, you can say, look at these legacy addresses that were given out. In retrospect, maybe that was an error, right? At the time, you knew no better, because at that point, they were going from a addressing system that can handle no more than 255 hosts to V4, which is what we have 4 billion today. So there was definitely some issues then, but in this case, it seems to be rather too early to be looking at conservation as one of the issues. It should be more on aggregation.
Basically the same that Mark said. I don't see that as an issue today. That doesn't mean you don't need to be careful with what you do. I think personally the big discussion is for you who are ISPs is how large a block you are going to allocate to a residential customer, because residential customers are the bulk of your customers. So if you choose to allocate the /48s, if you choose to allocate /56 or whatever, it will definitely impact your addressing plan and the amount of addresses that you're going to need. Now, which is the right size? No one has an answer to that. The IETF used to have an RFC, I don't remember, I think it's what, 3112? Huh?
Yeah.
But it's been deprecated, right? The old one recommended a /48 for everybody, right? And that didn't seem right. For many years, many people disagreed with that. And last year, the IETF brought a new document, which is RFC 6112, that actually backs up from that mandatory requirement and says, okay, you can do /48s, but you can do also /56 and /60s for residential customers, and the choice lies on you. Okay? So, as most of the things in the internet, you as a service provider need to decide what is best for your customers. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Carlos.
I want to add a couple points to that as well. I think there's a couple of things. One thing that I think a lot of people miss is they look at the 128-bit address of IPv6 and see that we're using 64 bits for the host address, right? That's the first place where you say, okay, we're using half the addresses. Right there, you're giving away 18 octillion, right? 18 million trillion addresses to every network segment, right? So even a /64 for a home is a ridiculous number of addresses. And what you have to do is take a step back and you look at when they were designing the IPv6 protocol, it was actually designed as a 64-bit address field. And what they did is they added 64 bits for the host specifically, right? So you're not necessarily wasting those 64 bits. Those 64 bits were added implicitly to have unique host identifiers and to have that potentially location and ID separation, right? And then the second thing is, what we really need to do is, and I have entire presentations on this, but there's a huge paradigm shift. You really have to change your way of thinking when moving from IPv4 to IPv6. I forget who it was. I think someone either today or yesterday mentioned the fact that we've gone from counting hosts, right, to deciding, okay, well, we're going to have 10 computers in this network and 12 computers in this network and 15 servers over here, and that's how we lay out our networks, to saying, okay, well, that's 3 networks. And it's really a paradigm shift from counting addresses to counting networks. And I think a lot of people are worried about wasting addresses rather than looking at the new paradigm of IPv6, which is we have addresses, what we have to worry about is networks. And so you don't want to waste networks necessarily, but addresses don't matter anymore.
Thanks, Chris. Yep, go ahead, you have a question?
We are looking into creating a local network of devices all over the island with only consumption to a local station, which I advise to start using IPv4 or IPv6 for them. So it's not going outside of the island. So it's basically also not going outside of a single provider. What should be the best practice to start with? IPv4 or IPv6?
I think both actually, and I think Curaçao probably has one of the better models, or probably the best model in the Caribbean right now, which is Carix. At Carix you can exchange both IP version 4 and version 6. So you can keep your local IPv6 traffic local. If I can remember correctly though, I know the providers pay IPv6 to some of the Akamai cache, but I don't think any provider is exchanging with each other IPv6 right now at Carix. Correct me, I think there's Flow and Starlet, right? Yeah, both V4 and V6. So, the infrastructure is there, so why not do it? Yeah. Any more questions?
I just wanted to ask, we were just discussing this a while ago during the break, what about listening to the comments of the gentleman before. You have to think in networks and not in hosts. What about /127 for point-to-point connection?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a very good one, and I think
I just want to bring it to the table.
Yeah, I think Chris wrote some very good articles on the best operating practices, and he can probably provide some links to it. But from what I remember, the analogy is sort of similar to IPv4, where we used /31s on point-to-point links. We're going to do the same with IPv6 and use /127s. So I don't want to call it conservation, but it's a similar idea. But Chris, you can probably share with us if you want on that.
Yeah, and again, as you mentioned, there is a document, but there's actually an entire process, not to hijack the mic too much, but we've started a group, because what we've seen is the IETF in general is kind of a slower process and is building standards, obviously, for building protocols, and is very much influenced by vendors and what they're able to build in the silicon and in the software. And so there's a number of network operators throughout the world who have started a new organization called Best Current Operation Practices. It's BCOP, and it's at bcop.org. The first documents we've started with are generating best common practices for IPv6 related things. The first one was addressing and subnetting plans, and that's the document we're referring to. And basically, there's a couple of issues with the /127, /128, especially early, because the way IPv6 was written, right? There's specific addresses used for specific things, and so you have potentially interoperability challenges. So really, the question there is a couple of things. One is network readability, right, or network operator readability. So if you go through your subnet plan and you take a /64, which is a huge number of bits, right? You have 64 bits to deal with after that. So if you take that 64 and break it up into 127s for all of your point-to-point links, it becomes fairly hard to keep track of, at least in your head, what addresses communicate with which addresses and which ones are on the ends of which links, right? Whereas if you just assign a /64 to a link, even if you configure it as a 127 on the link, you can have : 1 and : 2, and you know what those talk to. Instead of having FE8012 by all the way, you can potentially have a lot of hexadecimal in there, and it becomes really, really difficult to pair those up in your head once you do that. So it's still evolving, right? People are still building out these networks right now. We're deploying this stuff right now, so these things will evolve. That's one of the things. That's one of the purposes of the BCOP, is to kind of evolve with that. But as far as configuring 127s, the best thing I can say is, if you're going to do it, test it in your lab first, because there are some vendor, especially combinations of interoperability and specific code loads, that'll have a problem with that. Because basically the anycast address is built into every subnet, and you can have some potential problems there. Which on the other side, you can also have problems configuring /64, because you have a bunch of addresses that don't exist. You have neighbor discovery bouncing back and forth looking for those. So there's a trade-off there, but it's a deeper discussion.